Apple's all-new iPad Pro has been debuted and it's only available to be purchased because the release date is on May 15th. And after doing a bit of research, there's actually 20 things that Apple didn't really talk about. Didn't mean to do that. And so in this video, I'm gonna go ahead and cover 20 things I noticed that Apple missed and some things you definitely need to know because I'm gonna be sharing with you how much I'm getting for my iPad Pro 11-inch with the M1 because I am doing Apple's trade-in offer. So if you'd like to find out that and more, stick around, especially if you're excited about the new iPad Pros as well as the iPad Airs by leaving that like button and let me see how many of you guys actually are excited about this new device. Let's begin. Starting off with number one, and that is the disappointment side of things. So in case you missed it, yes, Apple did remove the ultra wide sensor on the camera housing and replaced it with some type of new sensor, which is said to be there to allow it to remove shadows whenever you scan documents. This is one of the key features that Apple was advertising during their keynote, and I'm highly excited to test that out. But we do continue to still have the LiDAR sensor, which is quite nice. I personally do use it a lot on my smartphone, especially when it comes to measuring stuff. It really does come in handy, even on an iPad. Other disappointing parts that I found out, well, unfortunately it doesn't really affect me, but if you live in the EU or in the UK, unfortunately the 20-watt power adapter is not included in the iPad Pro. Massive disappointment there. There's no price decrease either to make up for it, but in reality, not much of a massive drawback, definitely an inconvenience, but again, I highly recommend swapping that 20-watt power adapter as I never wanted to use that on my iPad Pro even, as I prefer using this one by Anker. It's much more reasonably priced, more smaller and compact. So I'll have this one linked in the description down below because the iPad Pro can actually max at 40 watts and allow this thing to charge even faster. So swapping that is basically an essential, but again, it's an inconvenience. Now, since this will be Apple's thinnest device on the market, thinner than a piece of gum too. The Magic Keyboard unfortunately is not compatible on the new iPad Pro. So if you have a white Magic Keyboard or the black one like I do, we are unable to actually use this on the new iPad Pro, unfortunately. We're gonna have to buy that out of pocket again, and it's pretty expensive, but materials and texture is definitely different than the existing Magic Keyboard, as now we actually have a proper function row, as well as Apple is claiming it to have some type of haptic feedback on the trackpad, and it also has an aluminum body, so not bad I guess for the new slight upgrades. I'm definitely excited to test that out, however. Another massive disappointment about the iPad Pro is the fact that if you have an existing second generation Apple Pencil, it's not compatible on the iPad Pro's 13 or 11-inch, unfortunately. But according to Apple's website, the only two devices that's still compatible with the iPad Pros would be the Apple Pencil with the USB-C that got released last year, and the Apple Pencil Pro, unfortunately. The iPad Air, same story. Apple Pencil Pro is compatible, as well as the Apple Pencil with the USB-C. I think this is due to the fact that Apple had to move the wireless charging for the wireless charging support for the Apple Pencil, which is why the second generation is not compatible. So unfortunately, that's another accessory that we cannot transfer over on the newer device. But something that is pretty unique to talk about is the fact that the Apple Pencil Pro will feature 5 unique boxes that says let loose from Apple's event, all going to be uniquely designed. So I'm pretty sure collectors will want to get their hands on it and somebody will buy all 5 just to complete their collection. And this could also be a preview on what's coming up next, because I'm sure Apple's going to use this on next generation products and create like a cool theme of like exclusive box arts for upcoming products like an iPhone, maybe the Apple Watch, who knows. So continuing with the cons, the iPad Pro is said to not have a SIM card slot, unfortunately. The newer generation iPad Pros, due to this thinner design, I'm sure this was the reason why Apple decided to remove the SIM card slot entirely for the cellular version and just utilize eSIM now. So you're gonna have to use eSIM, especially if you travel a lot. You can no longer just swap out a SIM card anymore. So kind of a headache, unfortunately, but it is what it is. Another thing that got removed stealthily was the nanometer wave for cellular. Somewhat does make sense why Apple decided to remove this, as nanometer wave really was only beneficial if you're on Verizon as an example, but even though you're on Verizon, you still need to have a clear path to cell phone towers to really utilize that to its full potential. So I guess it makes sense why Apple decided to pull this off, because the majority of people were just strictly not utilizing it to its full potential. Now, two things are pretty interesting about the iPad Pro in terms of what's inside the box. The iPad Pros are the only ones that are going to become included with a USB-C braided black USB-C cable, which I thought was kind of cool. iPad Air would just have a generic one that we've been seeing in the past. And then the other thing is Apple stickers are no longer going to be included inside the box. Massive deal breaker. Again, I know we all love the Apple stickers, but this is probably due to the fact that Apple is just trying to reduce waste. I've just been personally collecting these, but yeah, unfortunately. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about the removal of the stickers? So there's two textures for the iPad Pros. There's a nano texture, which is said to have some type of matte finish, which is ideal to use whenever you're working in a bright environment. It eliminates glare as much as possible, with small sacrifice of like clarity and contrast from the display, but nothing crazy that will actually ruin your productivity. So this is only available if you select a 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte iPad Pros. So it's really expensive. Not sure if everybody wants to do this. I personally am going to stick with the route of selecting the default gloss, which is the one I pre-ordered. I pre-ordered a base one, and I may just put a paper-like matte finish screen protector on it. So just giving you a heads up, there is that option, but it's not going to protect your screen like an actual matte screen protector would. And if you look closely, the edges are still glossy, so it's still prone to get scratched. So it's interesting nonetheless. So the battery capacity on the iPad Pros, the 11 and the 13 inch, are different. You see, the small 11 inch actually got an increase in battery milliampere hour capacity. Let me get my notes right now. So get this, the 2022 M2 iPad Pro that was released in October has a milliampere hour capacity of 7,538. The new one that's coming out on May 15th has a increase of 8,340 milliampere hour. Meanwhile, the large 13-inch iPad Pro, the M2, the 2022 model, year 2022 in case you're lost with numbers, that one has a battery capacity of 10,758 milliampere hour. Meanwhile, the new one that's coming out, the iPad Pro 13, has 10,340 milliampere hour. So a small decrease in the larger size iPad. Meanwhile, the small iPad Pro got a small increase, which is quite interesting. But regardless, even though the battery capacity of these two are somewhat of a downgrade and an upgrade, it's still able to receive the same similar battery life from the previous generation. Just something that was kind of interesting. And since we're talking about processors, like the chipsets and stuff, so the M4 chipset did get leaked in terms of its Geekbench scores. And they're pretty high. Definitely does show that it has increased overall performance, but we don't know what that means in the real world. But something I do want to clarify and talk about a bit more is the CPU core processors. The M4 actually has 10 cores. Meanwhile, the previous M2 only had a total of 8, so quite interesting. But yes, it definitely lives up to the claim that it is much more powerful than the previous generation iPad Pros. Now, this being a thinner iPad, the thinnest Apple product ever, thinner than a piece of gum. I'm not sure if the Apple credit card is counts, because technically that's an Apple product and it's definitely thinner than that. But due to this thinness, Apple reported to increase the copper, so thermal performance should be identical to the previous generation M2 or even better when it comes to thermal management. So I'm definitely looking forward to test that out with my thermal gun. Now let's talk about the iPad Air a little bit more. So the iPad Air did increase a new technology, Liquid Retina display, but it's the same Liquid Retina display we've seen in the past, just with its new ones, much more efficient, slightly bigger, not really noticeably bigger, but slightly increased. But the brightness is actually upped by 100 nits, as previously the iPad Air only had 500 nits of brightness. The new one can actually deliver 600 nits of brightness. So I'm starting to think that the iPad Air is probably the better value iPad here, especially the fact that if you already have like a Magic Keyboard as an example, it's compatible on the iPad Air. And then you could continue using the Apple Pencil Pro if you really want to step it up a notch and utilize that barrel roll, the Find My ability. I think that's a pretty good upgrade from the previous generation Apple Pencil. The Find My, I'm pretty sure that is one of the key features that makes sense to buy the Apple Pencil Pro, because I lost mine like multiple times already. So with all these new changes, a secret thing that Apple did change is on their website actually, because you see the 9th generation iPad is gone. Apple is ditching the 9th generation, 8th generation, 4th generation, the generation naming, and are just strictly naming it like Apple does with their MacBook computers as an example. So now the naming scheme is going to be, as an example, like the iPad Pro M4, iPad Pro 13, M4. That looks like that's going to be the new naming scheme Apple's doing. They're ditching the generations now. And then for the iPad mini, unfortunately, there's no news on that, which was really a massive letdown in my opinion. The iPad mini is an amazing iPad, still my personal favorite iPad, more than the iPad Pro, and I feel bad. I'm just not happy knowing that the iPad mini new generation version of it is not coming. It wasn't debuted during this keynote. I think that was a massive disappointment right there. And I'm sure there's many others that also agree. So how much am I getting for my iPad Pro 11-inch with the M1 chipset? Well, I'm actually getting $385. I'm not sure if that's a bad deal or a good deal, but I'm traded in with the Apple trade-in program, which definitely does help out with the overall cost, because I'm getting the base version of the iPad Pro 11-inch, so about 258 gigabytes. This available storage has 128, so less than that. I'm getting more storage with the new upgrade. So I think that's a good deal. Let me know in the comment section, what do you think? But if you're curious, if you also have the M1 iPad Pro 11-inch, that's how much I'm getting for. Mint condition, no damages whatsoever. The only drawback though is I'm unable to use this Magic Keyboard, so I have no idea what to do afterwards. It's not great knowing that Apple does not have a trade-in service for this, as this is pretty expensive on its own. But I guess for others who are upgrading to the iPad Air, the latest generation, they could use that since it's compatible, just not the Pro, of course. And yes, I'm getting in space gray for those who are wondering. Same goes for the new Magic Keyboard as well. There you guys have it. Just wanted to talk about this, the new generation iPad, and that's about it. Thank you so much for watching.